Despite facing tremendous oppression, persecution, and adversity, the Irish immigrants' journey to freedom was nothing less than an incredible feat of courage and prosperity compared to the lives that they were leaving behind them. Before immigration was the long and dark road that inhabitants of Ireland had to endure before deciding to forego everything in hopes that America would be a better home. Religious persecution began in the 17th century when Elizabethan times began requiring uniformity of religious practices. Within the next century, penal laws would discriminate against their rights to worship and congregate unless they agreed to abide by the Church of England's rules.
England owned all the areas around my home, even took land away from my grandparents.
Soon after came the potato famine, which wiped out Ireland's most depended upon crop and more than 1 million lives, leaving Ireland in shambles. On top of all of this, the country was facing agricultural crisis and industrial decline. Landlords burdened by debts struggled to make payments, farmers could no longer make rent, and the rural poor could not afford to own land or homes anymore. These struggles led almost 500,000 Irish to begin emigrating to America beginning in 1820. The Irish left home seeking a better life in America, almost all of them knowing that they would never return.
The Irish were constantly gazing out across the great unknown ocean, speculating on a land farther to the west, so in a sense they've always been looking for America even before they knew it existed.
They traveled by ship, which took about 2 to 3 months. The conditions on the boats were unbearable. Up to 900 people were crowded together only with room to hold their belongings. The Irish fled to many cities along the East Coast, but the most popular was Boston. In 1 year, the Irish population in Boston increased from 30,000 to 100,000. From 1820 to 1900, 5 million Irish immigrants came to the U.S., leading to Ireland's population decreasing by an entire 1/3. The Irish immigrants had a hard time assimilating into the American lifestyle. Native-born Americans did not like them because of 1, their social behavior. Since Irish people were raised in a different culture, they acted differently and had a different way of thinking. 2, their impact on the economy. The Irish people worked for low wages and did jobs that are comparable to slavery. And 3, the Catholic religion. 70% of Irish immigrants belong to the Roman Catholic Church. The Irish immigrants who came to America during the time of the potato famine were the most disadvantaged. The ones who fled to New York lived in Lower Manhattan, which Charles Dickens described as reeking everywhere with dirt and filth, with lanes and alleys paved with mud knees deep. These neighborhoods were filled with hideous tenements which took their name from robbery and murder. All that is loathsome, dropping, and decayed is here. The Irish who were poor, which was the majority, lived in basements, cellars, and one-room apartments which lacked natural light and ventilation and frequently flooded with sewage. Not only were the living conditions poor, but because of their lack of money, resources, and their environment, they suffered from multiple diseases. They had high rates of cholera, yellow fever, typhus, tuberculosis, and pneumonia. A majority of the immigrants who came to America had little to no work experience, and so the only jobs they could find were the least desirable ones. It was common for the men of the family to do very dangerous and physically demanding work. Many Irish women became servants or worked in factories. The factories had terrible working conditions and wages. In most cities, women were paid 6 to 10 cents for every shirt they made, and while working 14 hours a day, they were only able to make 9 shirts a week. The Irish exchanged their ability of living in the United States to working jobs that made them even more disliked and barely kept them out of poverty. Because the Irish were willing to work low-wage jobs, nativists blamed them for ruining the economy. Many businesses turned away Irish and multiple newspaper articles were published attacking them.
The Irish were, by the way, perceived to be a separate race. And that is, it wasn't just that they were from the British Isles, but were Catholic. They were perceived to be of an utterly different race. If you asked a 19th century, an early or mid-19th century American, if they could tell who was Irish, they would say absolutely. That is, if they had physical characteristics that it was believed set them off from others. And therefore, the reaction was a racial one as well as a religious one, as well as a cultural one, as well as an economic one.
On top of all of this, native-born Americans launched a sustained attack on Irish immigrants because of their Catholicism. Americans believed it was the religion for the uneducated foreigner. In 1834, a mob burned down the Ursuline Convent in Charlestown, Massachusetts. In 1836, nativists in New York published The Awful Disclosures of Maria Monk, a book containing information about the sexual and physical abuse of nuns because they chose to be Catholic. And in 1844, nativist rioters burned down 2 Catholic churches in Philadelphia suburbs in a dispute between parties on whether to use the Roman Catholic Bible or the Protestant King James Version in the public schools. For decades, Irish immigrants were singled out because of their strong tie to the Catholic Church, but this helped them assimilate. The Irish took over the Catholic Church and opened up new ones all around the country. They let native-born Americans join their congregations, which led to more nativists converting to Catholicism. John F. Kennedy was a huge stepping stone when it came to Irish Catholic civil rights, because he was the first Irish Catholic president that the United States had seen. Kennedy's Fitzgerald side of the family emigrated from Ireland to the United States sometime between 1848 and 1855. And when he was elected in 1960, Irish immigrants finally felt that they had someone of Irish and Catholic descent to stand up for their rights and relate to. This and numerous years of adaptation led the Irish immigrants to finally be accepted in the United States. By the year 1970, they were being paid equal wages and being afforded the same privileges and rights that the Americans had been given in previous years. They no longer lived in tenements in the city, but were accepted in rural areas as well as urban ones. And to this day, the Catholic religion is widely accepted because of the Irish. Although their initial encounter with America was not easy, it was well worth it to escape the religious persecution, the potato famine, and the agricultural depression going on in Ireland, and finally achieve the freedom that they had been seeking.